Verses 3 and 4 of Psalm 32 are a great description of what I call the weight of unconfessed sin. While I kept silence, my body wasted away through my groaning all day long. For day and night your hand was heavy upon me. My strength was dried up as by the heat of summer. One of the things I alluded to in my sermon on Sunday was, what's the heaviest thing that you've lifted? What's the heaviest thing that you've carried? And depending on your strength and fitness and a few other factors, that will vary. You might say, well, I could once lift 50 pounds or 100 pounds or even a couple hundred pounds. But even if you're really strong, and even if at one point in your life you could bench press 300 pounds, you can't bench press 300 pounds for long. And you got to put it down. And I think in some ways, the heaviest thing to carry and to lift is the weight of our unconfessed sin, because it weighs us down and it exhausts us. And that's what we hear in this description in verses 3 and 4 of Psalm 32. While I kept silence, meaning while I failed to confess and acknowledge my sin, my body wasted away. Now, we don't know in the psalmist's case, does this mean he had physical manifestations or symptoms, if you will, of his unconfessed sin? This sometimes happens. Sometimes when we know we've done something wrong and we are guilty of sin before God, some of those physical symptoms, for some people, they may manifest as headaches. For some people, it may manifest as a higher blood pressure or an accelerated heart rate or an upset stomach. These are all things that sometimes, not always, but sometimes these are signs something's wrong. And something may be wrong physically, but something may also be wrong spiritually or emotionally or relationally. So while I kept silence, his body wastes away. And that image in verse 4, for day and night your hand was heavy upon me. It's like David or the psalmist can feel the weight of pressure of, I know I've made a mistake, but I won't acknowledge it. He says, my strength was dried up as by the heat of summer. And we all can relate to what it's like when it's so hot that we're just lethargic. And some of us, especially me, I don't function very well once it gets too hot and too humid. And it just saps you of energy. And this is what unconfessed sin does. So we learned from verses 3 and 4 the heavy weight of unconfessed sin. And tomorrow we'll talk about, well, what do we do about that?